Welcome to the 700 Club. There's outrage in America and beyond. President Trump feeling the fallout from his decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria, even from one of his staunchest supporters. Will the president walk it back? And what's the worst that could happen if he doesn't? Here's CBN's Gary Lane.
A big backlash over President Trump's announcement that U.S. troops would be withdrawn from northern Syria. The outrage came not only from Trump's allies at home, but also from America's Kurdish allies in the Middle East. These Kurdish women protested Trump's decision to allow a threatened Turkish invasion near the Turkish border in Ras Al Ain, Syria. It's video like this showing American troops departing from positions in northern Syria that has them so upset. They fear America is abandoning them. Some lost husbands, sons, and brothers in the war against ISIS. Now they fear without American troops as a buffer, their longtime enemies, the Turks, will slaughter their surviving family members. The fallout in Washington even more troubling for the president. Even one of Trump's staunchest supporters, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, publicly criticized the presidential decision.
If we abandon them, good luck getting anybody to help America in the future with radical Islam, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS.
Other Trump allies, like Trump's former UN ambassador Nikki Haley and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, also criticized the move. Some in the administration are saying only a small number of the U.S. troops are being pulled out. But at the White House Monday afternoon, the president said he's fulfilling a campaign promise to bring American troops home from foreign wars.
Why are you siding with an authoritarian leader and not our Kurdish allies?
Well, I'm not siding with anybody. We've been in Syria for many years. You know, Syria was supposed to be a short-term hit, just a very short-term hit, and we were supposed to be in and out. We want to bring our troops back home.
In response to the political backlash, President Trump took to Twitter, insisting, quote, "If Turkey does anything that I, in my great and unmatched wisdom, consider to be off limits, I will totally destroy and obliterate the economy of Turkey."
I've done it once. I did it with Pastor Brunson. You remember the Pastor Brunson? And they wouldn't give Pastor Brunson back, and they ended up giving Pastor Brunson back pretty quickly. Their currency fell at record levels, and lots of other things happened.
Also sending a warning to Turkey, Iran, with Foreign Minister Zarif voicing opposition to a planned Turkish military operation in northern Syria. Zarif is urging Turkey to respect Syrian sovereignty and integrity. And then there's the issue of 5,000 ISIS prisoners now guarded by the Kurds who might end up in Turkish hands. Many of the jihadists are from Europe and could either end up returning to unleash terror on their home countries or regroup inside Syria. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Well, CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is with us now. And Chris, what are the implications of this Syrian Democratic Force partner with Syrian President Assad?
Well, what the Syrian Democratic Forces have said, Pat, in a statement, they said that we're considering a partnership with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad with the aim of fighting the Turkish forces. And, Pat, this would just change everything. And what this is, first of all, it's a message to the people in northeast Syria that the Syrian Democratic Forces are going to have their back, that will protect them. But what it also does, if it brings in President al-Assad to the northeast part of Syria, it also opens the door for the Iranians. Iranian militias have been on the border of Syria for about 2 years, and they're waiting just to come in. It would also open up oil fields, some of the richest oil fields in the Middle East, to the Iranians, so it would give them that. It would also get them closer to Israel. So what this does is really turns everything upside down if the Syrian Democratic Forces turn themselves toward President Assad and away from Erdogan, because, Pat, they see Assad as a lesser evil than Erdogan. But if they did so, it would diminish U.S. presence in the region, strengthen the enemies of the United States and Israel, and make it much more dangerous for Israel here in the Middle East.
Chris, do the Turkish forces see this invasion as a jihad against unbelievers? And what does that put us in as the United States?
Well, it sort of enables jihad against these people. Pat, in a pro-Erdogan newspaper, this is what they said. Go and tell to the unbelievers the army of Muhammad is back. Let me say it again. Go and tell to the unbelievers that the army of Muhammad is back. Now, President Trump may see this as a campaign promise, pulling out U.S. troops from what he calls endless wars. But the Turkish forces and Erdogan, a Muslim Brotherhood backer, sees this as a jihad. So it really puts President Trump in the position of backing a jihad against unbelievers. And who are these unbelievers? These are Christians, Yazidis, Arabs, the Kurds in the part of northeast Syria that we've been sitting down with, breaking bread with some of these people. Some of these people are Christians, some of them Muslim background believers who actually came to Christ and right now are enjoying religious freedom in this part of northeast Syria. And Pat, one thing to remember is the example of Afrin. It happened last year. The Turkish army, along with jihadist forces, captured the town of Afrin in northwest Syria. They hunted down Christians. They burned churches, and they literally displaced hundreds of thousands of Kurds. That's exactly what the people are looking at in northeast Syria as an example of what may happen if the Turkish forces come in.
Chris, I have a map of a Kurdistan that should be before people. You know, I have, this is where the Kurdish region in Kirkuk, it's in that little area, but that also has some very powerful oil. The Kirkuk oil is extremely prolific. And do you think our people have any knowledge of how much oil is out there?
Well, Pat, that's one of the richest oil fields in the whole Middle East. We were there not too long ago when the Peshmerga, the Kurdish fighters, were fighting ISIS. And that's one of the prizes. In fact, after the referendum that the Kurds had back in September of 2017, the Iraqi government, backed by Iranian militias, actually now control that part. And that scenario might play out in northeast Syria if the Syrian Democratic Forces ally themselves with Assad and then go back, which opens the door for the Iranians. And again, Pat, it's really important to emphasize the fact that the Turkish forces, they're not coming to come against the threat of the Kurds. This is really a jihadist war, which puts the U.S. and President Trump in the position of actually enabling a jihad if the U.S. presence is pulled out of northeast Syria.
Chris, I'm shocked about this. One last question. How many of these ISIS fighters are captive now? Do you know? I think the president is concerned about who's going to pay the bill for them.
That's right. There were about 7,000 ISIS prisoners that I've heard, maybe as many as 12,000, including men, women, and children. And the idea, what the Syrian Democratic Forces are saying, is that if Turkey comes in, they won't be able to both fight Turkey and manage all these prisoners. They say they might be released into Iraq. You can imagine what thousands of hardened ISIS fighters would do if they are sent into Iraq. So that would reignite the war against ISIS all over again. The impression we understand that President Trump thinks is that many of these ISIS fighters are right along the Turkish-Syrian border. That's not true. They're down south, and it's unlikely that any Turkish forces would come that far south. And one thing I'd like to add, Pat, is that your comments yesterday, they've been heard here in the Middle East, in northeast Syria. And I was told that your comments about this whole situation about President Trump were very encouraging to them. And they are looking to major U.S. evangelical leaders like yourself to speak out and help protect the Christians, the Kurds, Yazidis, Arabs in this part that really has an embryonic democratic government that is just springing forth, that is under peril right now. So they're looking to voices like you, Pat.
Thanks, Chris. Well, I'm a voice. I tell you, I am so concerned, and I'm exercised in my spirit. There are 35 million Kurds. It's the only people group that does not have its own nation acknowledged by the governments of the world. And I think that the president should issue a Trump declaration that declares that the homeland for the Kurds is recognized by the United States. And that whole area, and with Kirkuk there, It is one of the richest oil fields in the world, and they have plenty of money to pay the bill for the United States to give them arms or sell them arms. And I think if we have a mutual defense treaty with the Democratic Republic of Kurdistan, 35 million of those people, we can take our troops home. The Peshmerga will do the job for us. And it's so, it's what they call a no-brainer. You block the Iranians to the south, you block the Russians to the north and the Assad forces, you block the Turkish forces, and you have a democratic republic in the middle of all this thing that's our ally, and they will do the fighting, and they've got the money. The Kirkuk oil fields are loaded. Can you imagine when they are developed, there'll be, it's 500,000 to 700,000 barrels a day currently. With the proper work, they can have as much as 1 million barrels a day of oil, not to mention huge deposits of natural gas. And that's all within Kurdistan. It's a no-brainer. You think, come on, let's go, Mr. President. Well, in other news, the budget deficit is exploding. It's higher than it's been in 7 years. Ephraim Graham has more of that.
Pat, the Congressional Budget Office estimates the deficit at $984 billion for fiscal year 2019. That's $205 billion higher than last year, a 26% increase and the highest since 2012. Budget hawks note the main drivers of the deficit are Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. The judge who gave a former Dallas police officer convicted of murder a Bible and a hug says she has no regrets. In the moving scene broadcast across the nation last week, Judge Tammy Kemp gives Amber Geiger her own personal Bible and then a hug. Kemp has been criticized for her actions, but in her first news interview, she says it did not happen unprompted. After Geiger's emotional hug with the victim's brother, she asked the judge if her life could have a purpose. When Judge Kemp replied, "I know it can," Geiger said, "I don't know where to start. I don't have a Bible." Remembering the Bible in her chambers, Kemp said, "Hold on, I'll get you a Bible." She brought it to Geiger and read her John 3:16. Then Geiger asked for a hug. Judge Kemp has been a deaconess in the Dallas church she attends for 25 years. She keeps a Bible in her office to remind her to start her day with prayer. Pat?
Well, I commend that judge. And ladies and gentlemen, why would we criticize a judge for blessing somebody who is going to spend years in prison and who is repenting of her deeds and who asked for a Bible? Why can't a judge do that? Of course she can. And anybody who criticizes it just doesn't deserve to be heard.